The most fundamental question in philosophy of religion is deceptively simple. What is God? Not whether God exists. Rather, what God is. What kind of being? If being is even the right word. What attributes? What relationship to creation? What constraints, if any? The Cayce Readings have a concept of God that is neither the wrathful deity of parts of the Old Testament, nor the distant clockmaker of Enlightenment deism, nor the impersonal absolute of some approaches. It is something more philosophically interesting than any of these, and it challenges several assumptions that most Western religious traditions take for granted. The readings insist that God is both personal and impersonal, immanent and transcendent, within all things and beyond all things. This is the position known in philosophy of religion as panentheism, God in the world and the world in God, yet God exceeding the world. The reading's portrait of a personal God is drawn in vivid contrast to certain Old Testament images portraying the divine as a god of wrath or warrior god. At the same time, the readings identify the impersonal aspect of God with the most fundamental force in nature, electricity. This is a philosophically bold claim. Not that God resembles electricity metaphorically, but that the creative vibrational energy underlying all of physical reality is the impersonal aspect of the same God who is personally related to each soul. The two aspects are not in contradiction. They are the immanent and transcendent faces of the same divine reality. This brings the readings close to Alfred North Whitehead's process theology. God as both the principle of order and creativity underlying the cosmos, and a personal experiencer who is affected by the world and who affects it in return. Here is where the readings become genuinely philosophically provocative. The God of the readings is not omnipotent in the traditional sense, and the reason is philosophically principled. Genuine companionship requires genuine freedom. A God who could override the choices of souls at will would not have companions. It would have puppets. Several readings affirm that God has need of human cooperation. If God were all-powerful in the classical sense, this need would make no sense. But in the reading's framework, God has voluntarily limited divine power for the sake of the relationship. The reading's God leaves something for souls to do, some task that only souls can do in cooperation with each other and their source. This is a God who invites co-creation rather than commanding obedience. The difference is philosophically enormous. Process theologians and open theists have developed similar arguments, that genuine divine love requires the genuine freedom of the beloved, which means a real limitation on divine control. The readings arrive at the same conclusion through the specific framework of companionship as the reason for creation. This leads directly to a limitation on divine omniscience that the readings state with surprising directness. When Edgar Cayce's biographer Tom Segru asked about reconciling God's foreknowledge with the soul's free will, the reading's response was philosophically precise. God knows everything that has been chosen. God does not know what has not yet been chosen, because the future genuinely depends on the free choices of souls. This is not a deficiency in God. It is the necessary consequence of creating genuine companions rather than predetermined actors in a script. The practical implication appears in a reading where a woman asks Cayce to predict the outcome of her personal problems. The reply is remarkable for its candor. The Lord Himself may not tell what one may think or do about a situation. Divine foreknowledge stops at the boundary of human free will. The future is genuinely open, for God as much as for us. Perhaps the most theologically unconventional aspect of the reading's concept of God is the suggestion that God suffers, not as a sign of weakness, but as the necessary consequence of genuine love. Whitehead wrote, "God is the great companion, the fellow sufferer who understands." Process theologians have argued that if God is love, and if love means genuine involvement with the beloved, then God cannot be unaffected by the suffering of creation. The readings speak carefully on this, never stating explicitly that God suffers, but pointing in that direction by noting that each soul is as a corpuscle in the body of God. The waywardness of a soul brings sorrow to the divine Father-Mother God. This is divine sorrow, long-suffering as a fruit of the Spirit that mirrors a divine attribute, and an extraordinary practical injunction that follows from it. Be kind, be gentle, be patient, be long-suffering, for if thy God was not long-suffering with thee, what chance would you have? The God of the readings is not the unmoved mover of Aristotle. It is a God whose love makes it genuinely vulnerable to the choices of the souls it created for companionship. The reading's treatment of the Christian Trinity is one of the most philosophically elegant aspects of the Cayce Readings, and one that resolves what has seemed to many an irresolvable theological puzzle. The readings affirm both the oneness of God and the triune model, and explain why there is no contradiction. Human consciousness on earth is three-dimensional. Any concept formed by three-dimensional minds will necessarily take a three-dimensional form. The Trinity is not the final truth about God's nature. It is the three-dimensional projection of a reality that exceeds three dimensions. The readings point out that planetary sojourns involve different numbers of dimensions. Each dimension of consciousness corresponds to a different experiential richness. A soul sojourning in a seven-dimensional environment would naturally form a seven-dimensional concept of the divine, which would make the three-dimensional Trinity look like a considerable simplification. As theologian Richard Drummond observed in his scholarly treatment, this is simply saying what sensitive theologians have long acknowledged: God exceeds our human theologies. The readings give that acknowledgement a specific cosmological grounding. The concept of God in the Cayce Readings is genuinely novel in the Western philosophical tradition, not because it invents new ideas, but because it includes process theology's relational God, panentheism's immanence and transcendence, open theism's genuinely open future, and a multidimensional cosmology in which the Trinity is a three-dimensional representation of something far larger. This is a God worthy of the soul's full engagement, not a monarch demanding obedience, not a watchmaker who set the clock and walked away, but a companion who desires relationship, limits power for the sake of love, does not control the future, and is genuinely affected by the choices of the souls it created. What is your concept of God? Not the concept you were taught, rather the concept you actually live by. Is it a God of wrath, of distance, of indifference, or one of love, companionship, and long-suffering patience? The readings say your life is, in some sense, a manifestation of your answer to that question.